Hello everyone, it's Wednesday afternoon and I've just had this huge parcel, well, fairly large parcel delivered from Hachette. I know what it is because this is a book that comes out next month. No, this month, February. In fact, I think it's next week. It's number 6 in a series I've been writing for Orion since 2018, when my friend Stuart told me in a pub, Palace Theatre pub in Edinburgh, and we were, it was the middle of the festival, and we were swapping family stories. And I was telling him about my grandmother and great-grandmother during the war on Tyneside. And he said, you should do all of this, you should do a saga. One of those wartime saga series. And so I did. I went back home that autumn. I wrote the first in what became the Elsie Mason books. Because the way publishing is, I was told if you write about working class women, it's for working class women. And you have to pretend to be one as well. So I had to adopt the pen name of Elsie Mason. Writing books that were just the same as I always write, really. They're about ordinary people in bizarre circumstances. And this first one, The Biscuit Factory Girls, began during the bombing raids on South Shields during the war. It is funny, though, the idea that only working class women will read these kinds of books. I think it's a patronising and really kind of nasty idea that is prevalent amongst the usually upper middle class people involved in publishing, it has to be said. I think the saga genre is one that most people would enjoy, really. But anyway, they like people in pigeonholes, don't they? So, how many years later is this? 7 years, almost, 6.5 or something. And book number 6 has arrived. This is the last one. Orion has done 2 trilogies with me, and I suppose I should be glad. They pay peanuts. And I've worked my socks off doing these. Not my Bernard socks, my actual socks. Writing these 6 novels, amongst everything else in recent years. I put my heart and soul into it. But I think they've sold well. They've earned out their advance, which is more than most books do. But Orion, whoops, I'm pulling this to bits. Orion don't want to go on, I was told, because they haven't sold through to the supermarkets. And that's the crucial thing to do. So, this is the most frangible cardboard box I've ever met. So, it's the last one. This is, lots of plastic. The Loveless Child by Elsie Mason, book 6. And I've got, I think, how many? 20. So they're generous with their author's copies anyway. It's something. Old Orion. It's quite nice. I don't think the character on the front looks much like the character in the book, to be honest. But it's quite a nice cover. England, 1940s, it says. Minnie has spent most of her life feeling like a plain Jane, watching things happen around her, waiting for something, just something, what to once happen to her. When her old best friend, the beautiful and callous Junie, unexpectedly returns to the 16 streets, Minnie's not quite sure how to feel. Once inseparable, the two now find themselves at odds, and when Junie strikes up a romance with Minnie's brother, Derek, Minnie can't help but feel lonelier than ever. Junie's looking to start anew. She's running from a mucky, strained life. I don't know who writes these blurbs. I wish I'd checked that one better. I don't think I saw it before it came out. In South Manchester, and the cruel man she shared it with. But when she returns to the 16 streets, all her old wounds from her mother to her friends surface. She has no choice but to face them and this place she once called home. In the midst of it all, can the two women find the way back to each other and themselves once again? Or will the 16 streets really break them apart? Well, it's an art in itself, isn't it? Writing a blurb. It's just like writing a novel. And it is quite touching, really, to realise that this is 6 books. Maybe 6 is enough. I kind of cover all the years between 1918 and, I guess, the mid-50s in this series. I'll read you the beginning. Chapter 1. Life was always going on around her, but Minnie Minton never really felt like she was fully a part of it. Life was exciting, wonderful, dizzying. Sometimes it could be alarming and dangerous, especially here at the heart of the 16 streets, where there was always some kind of drama going on. Still, Minnie Minton felt she was left out of things. Take this evening, for example. There was a celebration going on in the Robin Hood public bar at the top of Frederick Street, where all of Minnie's family and friends lived. There were boys back from the front on leave, and they were being welcomed home for a little while. Why, you could hear the noise from the pub all the way over here, on the other side of the street, where Minnie was working at the fish bar. The heated hullabaloo could still be heard. How she longed to be part of that gathering, singing along to the old songs at the piano, maybe having a dance or a cuddle with someone. She flushed even to think about that. How silly of her. Who would want to cuddle Minnie Minton? At 27, she was more homely looking than ever. She was moon-faced and ever so slightly boss-eyed. This was the less than kind way her best friend Junie had once put it. Junie, who was blonde and slim and beautiful and had a sharp way with words. Your face is sort of puddingy, Minnie. That's what I'd call it. Your eyes are like currants in a big doughy bun. She knew that Junie hadn't really set out to hurt her feelings. It was just the way she was. She felt that she could talk any old how to her best friend in all the world, and there would never be any hard feelings. How could there be? Minnie adored Junie and always had, ever since the first day the blonde girl had arrived here in the 16 streets. How long ago was that? By, it was years ago. It was well before the war started, wasn't it? Junie was only 16 when she pitched up here as the long-lost daughter of the landlady of the Robin Hood. Minnie herself had only been 17, and she had felt much, much younger beside the self-possessed and sophisticated Junie. All that time ago. Why, it seemed a whole different world, the world as it was before this damned war. It had been a poor time, and they'd all been hard up, of course, but at least there was no danger. It was a relatively carefree world. There hadn't been death raining down from the skies when the Luftwaffe came roaring overhead like demons from hell. People had never had to sit all night sheltering deep underground as the bombs went off. Mind, hiding under the ground in the deep, damp shelters was preferable to the alternative. Everyone in South Shields knew someone who had been killed or made homeless by the air raids. Everyone Minnie knew had been brushed by the shadow of death. She shivered and shook herself out of her gloomy thoughts. There was work to do. She had fish to fry and chips to cut and customers to serve before her night's work was over. A whole night manning the hot counter of sweaty Betty's fish bar could be exhausting, but Minnie was determined to finish up here and shoot over to the Robin Hood. She wanted to get there in time for last orders so that she could see what all the fuss was about over there tonight. Her mother was beaming at her endless queue of customers, wrapping their suppers in reams of grease-proof paper and pages of the Gazette. "You'll let me nip off early for last orders, won't you, ma'am?" Minnie asked. Betty Minton scowled at her daughter. Minnie, you're a hopeless article. What do you want over there with that lot? They don't want you hanging around them all the time. Them Farleys and the Sturrocks and all of them, they just laugh at you behind your back, you know. You'll never fit in with that crowd." Minnie felt her face grow hot. "That's not true," she gasped. She realised she was answering back in front of customers, but she didn't care. "They're all good friends of mine," her mother tutted. "None of you lot are bairns anymore. You're not going out to play with your pals. Why, they're all courting and getting married, all those Farley boys and what have you. Even that Tom Farley has gone and got himself married, I hear. Some lass from down Norfolk. She's come up here to live. They're all just about spoken for, all the lads round here." Betty Minton laughed and shook her head so that her flabby wattles shook. There's no use hanging around all them lads, Minnie. You've not caught yourself one yet, and I doubt that you ever will. Minnie frowned. I'm not after catching myself a lad, she said in a small voice, but they're all my friends, all the lads and lasses round here, even if they're grown up now and getting married and settled. Why, I still like to keep up with what's happening with them all. It's important to me. Her mother sighed, wrapping up 4 fish suppers for portly Mr. Chesney, who lived right at the bottom of Frederick Street with his 3 grown-up daughters. That little pink-faced man with a ginger tash had his overcoat buttoned right up to the neck against the autumn cold, and he looked just as amused by Minnie's silly chuntering as her mother was. Mr. Chesney, sweaty Betty appealed to him. You've brought up 3 daughters. Why, you've done so very successfully, and as a widower too. You've done a fine job, and all 3 girls are a credit to you. What do you reckon to my one, eh? What do you have to say about this useless article? Betty waved dismissively at Minnie, who was dusting silvery fillets in flour and blushing furiously. But portly Mr. Chesney from number 1 Frederick Street was a kindly parent. He was much kindlier than Betty Minton. Ah, she's a fine girl, your Minnie. I always thought so, Mrs. Minton. She's worth 10 of the more flashy ones round here. You'll see one day, Mrs. Minton, you'll see what a treasure she is. Then he paid for his family's supper and shuffled out with a swift nod at them both. Betty Minton stared open-mouthed at his departing back, and Minnie allowed herself a small grin of delight at the compliment. She wanted to shout, "See, Mother, not everyone thinks I'm hopeless." Poor Minnie, and I feel like Minnie's book is speaking up for itself as well. Poor Minnie, the star of a book series that's been cancelled even as the book comes out. Anyway, that's the book, and I hope you will go and catch up and read all 6 if you haven't already started the series. Elsie Mason is the author, not me. Okay, see you again quite soon. Bye-bye.